hated the day. The day was a miserable day. I mean, it was a...
Really? I thought...
Well, was it? Well, I can tell you now, it was the worst royal engagement I ever did. You know, I thought to myself, you know, this is all showbiz rubbish. You know, the whole thing was just stage managed to suit them. Worst royal wedding I ever did. He was angry, and I felt, you know, we were punished for that. To offend our queen, like he did in that book, you know, it really upset the king. And you know, I don't think he could easily forgive that. And I imagine the king's had strong words with him over it.
About what really happened at Meghan and Harry's wedding, and the story is far from flattering. It is not only surprising, but also deeply embarrassing for the couple, and even for the royal family. When the news of Prince Harry's marriage to Meghan first broke, people across the United Kingdom were filled with excitement and eagerly counted down the days until the wedding. But according to Arthur Edwards, who spent many years covering the royal family and knows them better than almost anyone, the reality of that day was nothing like what the public expected. Arthur, who traveled the world alongside King Charles and witnessed countless royal moments, was there to photograph every meaningful glance and every personal exchange between the bride and groom. Instead of witnessing the magical celebration everyone had imagined, he found himself watching events unfold in a way that no one could have predicted. Rather than seeing a joyful royal occasion, he witnessed confusion and turmoil unfolding behind the scenes.
The photographers they engaged for the job was 5 feet away. You know, it was just hopeless. And then the carriage shot, when they went past me in the carriage, they looked the other way. So for me, it was a disaster.
As they passed by in the carriage, they turned their heads and looked in the opposite direction. From my point of view, the whole experience was a complete disaster. The wedding had been presented as one of the biggest events of the year, with famous celebrities from around the world invited to attend. Well-known names such as Oprah Winfrey, Elton John, and Serena Williams were there, even though Oprah Winfrey had only met the couple once before.
You know, and then Oprah Winfrey had met them once. She was a guest. The Clooneys, you know, the guests. I mean, never met them before, but they were the guests. And, you know, I thought to myself, you know, this is all showbiz rubbish, you know.
Did you get a sense then that they wanted out, that they wanted a California life, that they wanted showbiz, that they weren't interested? If they weren't interested in making people feel welcome at the wedding,
Looking back, it gave the impression that they already wanted a different future. It seemed as though they were focused on building a new life in California and becoming part of the entertainment world, rather than embracing their royal roles. It also felt like making their guests feel genuinely welcome was not a priority during the wedding. The event was called the Wedding of the Century for a reason, but behind all the excitement and glowing headlines, things were not nearly as perfect or as smooth as the media made them appear.
Beyond the lone family member she invited was simply inviting celebrities who were total strangers to her. I could see, especially with a wedding of this scale, inviting a handful of people who you do not know, but certainly not to this extent. There were a huge amount of guests who she had never met. Some people didn't even come. Like, for example, Reese Witherspoon said, "Why would I go? I don't even know them."
Arthur admitted, "I do not even know them," and his account paints a clear picture of what appeared to be complete chaos from the very beginning. From your seat at home, the wedding probably looked elegant, glamorous, and perfectly organized. But for Arthur and many of the guests, it felt less like a joyful celebration and more like an exhausting test of endurance. The heat at the venue was overwhelming, so intense that simply standing outside for long periods became unbearable. As someone closely connected to the royal household, Arthur was required to wear a formal traditional royal outfit. A heavy suit that looked far more suitable for winter than for a warm spring wedding. Even so, he stood there struggling through the heat, doing his best to remain composed while wishing he could be anywhere else. Although he kept a calm expression on the outside, all he could think about was escaping the relentless sun. Arthur and the other guests had no shade to shelter under and nowhere to cool down. Celebrities dressed in their finest clothes desperately waved their official wedding programs like fans in an effort to find some relief. It was nothing like the glamorous royal wedding many people had imagined. Then there was the food, or more accurately, the disappointing lack of it. Arthur said the reception was a major letdown because instead of the grand royal banquet everyone expected, guests were served tiny bite-sized canapés. The portions were so small that many people left feeling even hungrier than before. Some guests became so frustrated that they complained they would have been better off staying at home than standing in the blazing heat for nothing more than a few small snacks. Yet as uncomfortable as the weather and the food were, Arthur believed they were not the biggest problems. He was stunned by the seating arrangements. Senior members of the royal family who had devoted decades of service to the crown were placed near the back of the venue, while less prominent royals were given seats at the front. It was a decision that surprised many people. Distinguished figures who had spent their lives serving the monarchy ended up with poor views, while junior royals enjoyed the best positions. Arthur himself was seated behind one of those lesser-known royals, leaving him with almost no clear view of the bride and groom. He later joked that it felt as though he was trying to watch the ceremony through a GPS screen, wishing there had been some way to navigate the confusion surrounding the entire event. During the wedding, relations between Prince Harry and the British media were already strained because he remained upset over the criticism Meghan had faced after their engagement. He believed she had been unfairly judged and treated with disrespect, and those feelings had not faded. Instead of smiling naturally for the photographers on such an important day, Arthur recalled that Harry appeared determined to avoid the cameras, carefully turning away whenever possible to prevent them from capturing the perfect photographs of him and his bride.
Harry was angry with us, really, because some of the things that had been said about Meghan, and quite rightly, some of the things that were said about Meghan during the engagement were pretty harsh. I want to sort of mention them now, but some of them were pretty unfair as well. And so he was angry, and I felt, we were punished for that. And in fact, I never got one picture in the paper published from that day.
Arthur himself was deeply frustrated by Harry's attitude throughout the day. What had been promoted as the wedding of the century turned into the most disappointing royal wedding Arthur had ever covered in his entire career. As he watched everything unfold, he found himself counting the minutes until it was finally over so he could leave, go home, and get some much-needed rest. Looking back, he reflected that he had covered many truly wonderful royal weddings over the years, which made this experience stand out for all the wrong reasons.
I've done some really lovely royal weddings. I did both King Charles's weddings. I did William's wedding. I did Andrew's wedding. I did Sophie and Edward. They were lovely occasions. But that today, I couldn't get out of Windsor quick enough. I promise you that.
What should have been a heartfelt celebration of love ended up feeling, in Arthur's view, more like a formal networking event than a royal wedding. To him, it was clear that for Harry and Meghan, the occasion was about much more than exchanging vows. He believed it had been carefully planned as a major media spectacle designed to keep all attention focused on them. In his eyes, it was not about royal tradition, public service, or honoring the long history of the monarchy. Instead, it seemed focused on creating excitement, dominating headlines, and making sure their names stayed in the public conversation, especially as they were believed to be preparing for a future away from royal life. Arthur did not hold back when describing the event, saying it was nothing like the magical royal celebration so many people had expected. Rather than feeling enchanting, it seemed like an exhausting struggle from beginning to end. Guests battled the intense heat while trying to remain elegant and composed, all as confusion unfolded around them. According to Arthur, the wedding did not reflect royal tradition. Instead, it felt distant and highly staged, with the main purpose of positioning Harry and Meghan for their future in the world of media and entertainment. He believed the couple had a clear vision for the event. In his opinion, the goal was not simply to celebrate love or bring families together, but to secure lasting public attention after stepping away from the royal family. He suggested they understood that once they were no longer working royals, remaining in the spotlight would depend on keeping people talking about them. And he believed the wedding played a major role in achieving that. To Arthur, the ceremony was more than a marriage. It represented the beginning of a carefully planned transition that would help keep them in the public eye. He viewed it as a defining moment, not only because they were becoming husband and wife, but because they were sending a message that from then on they intended to live life on their own terms, free from the restrictions they associated with royal life. In Arthur's view, the wedding marked the start of a new chapter, one they described as a search for privacy, yet one that continued to attract constant public attention and widespread media interest.
Decided to leave the royal family and go his own way in the United States, and he's just behaving, I think, sometimes appallingly. Certainly some of the things he said about members of the royal family, certainly, and Camilla and Catherine and his brother. I think you just don't do that with families.
Even after the wedding was over, the controversy did not come to an end. Arthur says it quickly became clear that Harry and Meghan intended to distance themselves from the royal family. And that message was impossible to ignore during their first major public appearance after the ceremony. Rather than embracing their place within the monarchy, they chose to appear on Oprah Winfrey's television interview and openly discuss their complaints. They accused members of the royal family of racism and unfair treatment, but Arthur made it clear that he did not agree with those claims and remained unconvinced by their version of events.
No, most of that interview was left on the cutting room floor because it was so one-sided and it was so unfair. And I think about watching it now, and you know, the visit about Archie and the colour of his skin. And I knew they'd be seething. I knew the Queen would be seething. I knew that the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, would be seething. It would be.
After spending decades covering the royal family, Arthur described the Oprah Winfrey interview as one-sided and unfair. He believed it was another example of Harry and Meghan choosing to publicly air their personal grievances instead of showing respect for royal traditions and the institution they had once represented. In Arthur's eyes, the wedding became far more than a single day of celebration. It symbolized the moment the couple began their departure from royal life. To him, it was not simply the wedding of the century. It marked the beginning of their transformation into a powerful media brand, leading them towards celebrity projects, major media deals, and commercial business ventures. He believed the wedding was more than a marriage ceremony because it represented the launch of a new public identity. In the years that followed, Harry and Meghan's separation from the royal family became even more noticeable. They welcomed their two children, Archie and Lilibet, but their relationship with the rest of the royal family continued to grow more distant. They chose to keep their children largely away from Harry's relatives, explaining that privacy was their reason. Although Arthur believed there were deeper issues behind those decisions than what was publicly acknowledged.
And it's one of the saddest things of all, Matt, of course, is that the children don't get to see their grandfather. Either grandfather, you know, and that's really so awful because they're not getting to meet their cousins and to know their cousins, and it's such a shame for them.
After stepping away from the royal family, Harry later returned to London for an Invictus Games event. Arthur claims that he reportedly declined an offer to stay at a royal residence, saying he had concerns about his security. However, Arthur questioned whether that explanation truly made sense. In his view, few places offer the level of protection and security provided at a royal palace, making the decision difficult for him to understand.
Over for the Invictus Games ceremony. He didn't want to stay in a royal residence that was offered to him by the king because he didn't feel he had enough protection.
Arthur believes Harry had already made the decision to leave the royal family's world behind and live the more ordinary life he had always said he wanted. Despite expressing serious concerns about his personal safety, Harry chose to stay at Coworth Park Hotel near Windsor Castle, where he could arrange his own security and have the freedom to decide where he wanted to stay. Arthur questioned whether security was truly the main reason for that decision. In his opinion, the explanation may simply have been used to justify Harry's preference for staying in a hotel instead of accepting accommodation offered by the royal family. Arthur felt that Harry had already made up his mind and was determined to stay at a hotel regardless of any other options available.
I think he wanted to stay in a hotel, and he was determined to do that. And don't forget, he travels with a small retinue of bodyguards as well. and suspect that was the reason why he did it. He had his own protection, and he felt that was enough.
Arthur's closing reflections on the wedding leave a powerful impression. What was expected to be a joyful fairy tale celebration ended up, in his view, becoming a display of ambition and carefully managed public image. Looking back, the wedding, with all of its confusion and unexpected moments, serves as a reminder that appearances can be misleading. What seems like a perfect dream from the outside may be something completely different behind closed doors. So, what do you think? Was this wedding truly as magnificent as it was presented to the world, or was it simply part of a much larger media strategy? Share your thoughts in the comments.